that's fine. I would like to give it back. So Judith Watson is doing some final edits and making it look consistent throughout the whole document. And she was gonna incorporate these changes that we have to the document to the one that she's gonna be working on and finalizing. It's basically put it into a standard template. The content's not changing or anything like that. It's just making the flow of the document all look the same. So with that said, if you haven't, or you would like to review it one more time, please do so by Labor Day.
Okay, is that all right with everybody? Nobody has anything, questions or anything they want to talk to Tom or have him bring back to the committee? No?
No.
Okay, moving along. It's gonna be a 10-minute meeting. All right, Tom, how about the subcommittee? Have you guys met? Any new information? Any discussions we should know about?
Yeah, our next meeting is September 3rd, so we're going to come back on that. Just to recap a couple of highlights, some of which we've already spoken about in the past. Our real, our original hope and plan was to have this be one of these MBTA community zones. And, regrettably,
Bless you.
It's been determined that, this South Union School building site is beyond the half-mile radius for that program. Oh, do you have some new information on that, Sarah?
Yeah, I do actually. So as the crow flies, it's a half mile. And as you drive it, it's just barely over. So I think that the location in terms of its proximity to the train station might work. We might be able to make a case that it is within that half-mile radius. I couldn't get a lot of specific guidance from DHCD at this point because they're not willing to go out on a limb yet and give feedback on individual sites and individual locations at this point. But in general, they said that they would be issuing additional guidance kind of into the fall. So I think that the proximity may be something that we can finesse. However, the reasonable size is really seeming to be the hitch at this point. I don't believe that because the district has to be of a reasonable size, and they're going to come up with what I did get from them in terms of feedback is that they're going to come up with a formula in terms of like how big your community is. I think maybe, density taken into consideration there and such. And then they're going to tell us, how to use that formula to determine what that reasonable size is. And so I don't believe that the one parcel as a standalone will meet that criteria. So I think we have good news in the sense that I think it is maybe close enough to meet the half-mile radius criteria, but I don't think that as a standalone, it will meet the reasonable size criteria, but we're still waiting on DHCD to come up with that.
So we'll have a more, no, thank you, Sarah. That's really good new information for me. And, without bogging down this entire meeting on this subject, if that is the case, and I guess maybe I should get together with you separately to figure out what that 5-mile radius, because is it like the driveway is in the 5-mile radius, but 3/4 of the site is not? I'm not sure if that gets us there. But in terms of the size of the zone, again, we don't have to get into it here, but that to me can be overcome by just making the zone bigger. It's not like we're changing, we're dramatically changing anyone else's property that's in the zone. It's just, we're just rezoning with an overlay district. It doesn't really affect them. And if that gets us to what we need to be for the South Union School building property, that gets us there. But we can delve into that more at the next, subcommittee meeting. But the other avenue we had really been focusing on is, if the MBTA community district does not apply, what are our other alternative options? One of the options we talked about was to see if the Southborough Affordable Housing Committee might be interested in taking it over and developing it themselves. And I know, Alex, was meeting with them. Since last time we met in July, We didn't have a meeting in August. I guess this is our meeting in August.
Bring it up.
Alice is gonna, and I think there's been some other, discussions with people from the housing committee, and they seem pretty open to it. And so part of that is digging down in some of, if they're open to the concept now, the next step is to dig down into the weeds as to what exactly that looks like, how it gets funded, how is it managed. And so I think that's where we're sort of at with the next steps of this. But I had written off the MBTA community, frankly. So, but if you and I should talk after this, if that's still back in play, we should bring that back into play and dig down into the details on that. And then, part of it, just from a sort of macro picture, it's, if we create an overlay district, or however we do this, even if we, it's not an overlay district and we just develop a plan for this, I think the best avenue is to get a developer to do it, and to do it some kind of private-public partnership, like, which is one of the strategies we discussed at the last meeting for our housing plan. And, I was thinking that it may be worth, maybe it's just me going on a little outreach tour to some of the, likely suspects who might be logical developers for this, site, Petrie and Bill Poutre and, the Bartolinis, and just kind of see what they would want, what would incentivize them to want to do this. Those are all developers who are Southborough developers, are interested in what happens with the town, may lower their criteria for profit return on a project if it's for something for the town. So I sort of think that I may do, an unofficial cup of coffee with each one of those people and just kind of feel them out for what they would sort of need to get to do to do this project and do affordable housing on it. So anyway, that's probably longer than you wanted, Dorian, but that's kind of where we stand.
What would it take to include some of the land more towards the train station in that zoning area? What would that?
I mean, it would just be, we could get into the weeds, but it's basically just drawing a bigger line as to what the zone is.
And just bringing like the road and part of that, the next lot over, and just making it so, okay.
And Dorian, I think what you're going at is, some residents may be freaked out. Oh my God, they're changing the zoning on my property. And we're really not, even though it's a sort of, outreach thing to help people get comfortable. If somebody rezones your land, it doesn't mean that anything, and it's not a rezoning of the land, it's an overlay district.
Right.
So it's really not an impact on their lands, even though they may freak out and say, oh my God, something's happened to my land. So it may be a matter of doing some PR to get those people comfortable. But I mean, just making the circle bigger is not doesn't adversely affect anybody.
No, but that would help qualify us into that MBTA.
Right.
Half a mile.
It has to be a reasonable size lot, which is an ambiguous term. But what Sarah's saying is that site itself, by itself, is not big enough to qualify. They're not going to view that as a reasonable sized lot.
What are they looking for then? What size lot are they?
So
I'm sorry.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't know. What I got in terms of feedback from DHCD is that they were going to develop a formula was the term that she used, and so taking into consideration what I believe, would be land mass, of the community, and potentially, again, the population density. The other, hitch to the development in Southborough, and I'll be interested to gain some feedback from DHCD when they start to finally release some, is the the absence of a sewer system in Southborough. So one of the things that MBTA communities legislation requires is 15 units per acre. And so clearly we're not going to be able to get that level of density when it comes to installing septic systems. So they're going to have to make some sort of, accommodation, for Southborough at the very least. And I'm sure there's some other smaller communities in Massachusetts, because it's just not sustainable. If you don't have a sewer system, you just can't build out to that level.
Yeah, just Sarah, just to drill down on that, drill down on that. I mean, we have a sewer septic issue with that site. Just leave zoning out of it. If we want to develop 15 units on that site or however, again, we can get into the weeds later, but there are different ways that we can achieve that 15 units per acre for purposes of zoning. In other words, it doesn't have to be, it's not like if we make a 40-acre zone and we're only doing 15 units on this site, that's still 15 units per the site acre. That satisfies the 15 units. But the sewer issue is a site issue that's completely independent of zoning, whether 15 units can be developed on there or 7 units on less than an acre that meets a 15-acre ratio or something like that can be done. But that's a development issue as to what amount of sewer can sustain that. Sorry, John, go ahead.
For sure.
I just have a question. So the requirement is they want you to be able to have 15 units per acre?
Yeah.
That's the
criteria
that's the goal.
Right.
But speaking from experience, I know zoning is so easy to change in this town. And especially when you want to put high density housing someplace. That's even easier.
Stop it.
No, was that sarcastic? I wasn't trying to be facetious, but seriously, I think that alone is gonna squash it. That I think you're gonna have more opposition to that 15 units per acre than you can possibly imagine, because
that's like 65 units on that 4.2 acres.
So can I make a suggestion? Let's not get into the weeds right now.
Okay,
I think there are different ways to cut it, John. Like we could do the development. We can divide up the property into a couple of lots. One of which is like a 3/4 acre, and do 7 units on that. There are ways to get around it. Sorry, John, go ahead.
So I just want to finish. So first, a couple of problems with this is, so the 15 units per acre is going to be almost impossible to get town backing on, just to even get the zoning through. Now you have to leave with the historical part of it. That building, you can't touch the facade because that is the oldest brick school left in the town. I think you get a lot of opposition of people trying to remove that or do anything with it. And I think that'll hinder it. And then we've already had developers look at it and nobody wanted. We got one bid for $400,000 for everything. So I don't know how you're going to be able to incentivize them that besides, $400,000 for 4 acres in Southborough, 4+ acres with a building on it was I thought pretty dang cheap. So I don't know how much more you're going to be able to get out of that. When Tom was speaking before with the DCHD, trying to get a meeting set up, a call with Tom, myself, and somebody from the DCHD that's going to be retiring that wants to help fund turning the school itself into affordable housing if possible, just to explore the funding part of it. Not that that's what it's doing, but to see what we can do, because supposedly there's monies that we could use up to $115,000 per unit for a 2-bedroom or $75,000 per unit for a 1-bedroom. The septic system at that place right now has a relatively good tank in it, but it's only a 2,000-gallon tank, so that hinders it. So septic's going to be an issue at that site. You got a lot of ledge there, which is also going to hinder some of the sites. But I think it's great to explore everything. But I think you're gonna with trying to get the overlay through, and zoning changes for a 15 to get it to meet the MBTA criteria. I think if that's an avenue you're going to try, you might want to start putting feelers out and talking to different committees now and planning board members, not only just Sarah, because I think that's going to be a bigger hurdle than you can even imagine to get.
Yeah, that's why, one of the issues, if we don't meet the half-mile radius, it's not worth going through all the trouble and the time and the effort. That's kind of in my mind, a threshold issue before we even continue to go down there. Yeah, candidly, before this call, I thought that we were just out of the running. I still sort of suspect that we probably are out of the running because of the proximity of the site to the MBTA. So, if that's the case, if we don't cross that initial hurdle, then the rest of the discussion is just kind of moot. But if we do, then we can drill down on some of these details and do exactly what you said, John. We can go do some outreach and see what people's appetite is for doing that.
One quick question on that point, the radius. how difficult is it to get a exemption from the state on that where we're so close?
It's a statute. It's built into the statute. That's gonna be hard to. Do
Yeah,
you know, Sarah? I can't imagine that they
you
just
know,
say.
I'm not sure, you know what I mean? How easy it'll be to get it.
Yeah, they're not like regs.
Those.
Alex, this is the actual Massachusetts statute. It's by half mile. I mean, that's just not something they can waive.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been, you know, I have emailed several times to ask these types of questions, but again, I only get very generic, you know, broad brush answers. And most of the time the answer is, we're going to be giving more guidance on that later. So, you know, I'm hoping that is forthcoming.
But we
Right.
might be able to rezone a small area and bring it to where it's within that 0.5, the half a mile.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, if the 0.5 area of the site, this portion of the site that's within the 0.5 area radius, if it's 10 feet, then, you know, we forget about it, just go home. But if it's like an acre and a half of the 4 acres, you know, maybe that's something that can be, I just don't know the fact, you know, I don't know the facts. So I'll talk to you after this there.
It's a guessing game at this point. We need more information, so.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, sorry, that took up longer than you probably wanted to,
No,
but that's
that's okay.
No, it's perfect.
No, it's great. Any discussion on it and moving forward, Tom, is great. I mean, the more we know, the better off we are. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate
Sure.
it. So next meeting, then we'll wait for an update from you from the September 3rd meeting.
On the septic, there's enough land around there. There are some systems that are put in for communities, for a whole community. So I don't know how expensive they are, but that kind of a system could conceivably easily handle 15 units.
About $1
You know,
million.
and then that might be, sorry, go ahead, John.
That septic, the sewage treatment that you're talking about is about $1 million plus. That'll
So-
handle it.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a calculus for a developer. I'm just a dumb commercial real estate lawyer. I'm not smart enough to understand what the, you know, financial hurdles that the developers go into. But, you know, if the project is economically feasible enough to them that it's worth their investment, you know, maybe they're willing to do it. I just don't know. And maybe we just get some developers who may take a little bit of a haircut on their profit hurdle to do a project like this. But yeah, John, you're way ahead of me, obviously. So maybe all the likely suspects have already looked at this and said, no, thank you. So if that's the case, our job is to explore options. So if the option is no one wants to develop it, then that may be the final outcome after a year and a half of looking at it. I don't know.
Dorian, do you remember, I think it was this committee. I can't remember if it was this committee or it might have been EDC. It might have been another one I was on. A few years ago, we had a developer that was looking to put an apartment building in town and with affordable housing aspect of it. And I can't remember who the developer was. It was a young guy. Was that this committee? And do we have any of the?
Oh, that was Brendan.
Giblin?
Yeah, he came to us. I think
No.
it was like when we first got on this committee. He was it was the young kid, right? The dark hair?
Yeah, out of Worcester
Yeah.
somewhere.
Yes.
But
So,
I mean, this might be he might be like the perfect. I can't remember his name, but if
no, I know who
you
he
can
is.
find
so-
it, you might be a perfect person for your committee to talk to, Tom. I mean, he was
Yeah.
looking to develop like an existing building and turn it into apartments.
Mhm.
Right, but he was a brand new builder. I mean, I could talk to him. I know who he is personally.
Oh, you
I
do?
don't think he has the financial wherewithal and.
Yeah, we need
ability
somebody who's
to do
got-
that. No,
It'd be a
he's brand
disaster
new
if we had
builder.
a developer start down this
He
road and have it
wasn't
blow
the-
up.
Okay, a different person then, because the one that I remember talking, he wasn't the builder. He had a client that was looking to do it that
Same guy.
had built other. Okay,
Investor.
yeah.
Same way.
You know, there are some, you know, other, you know, avenues that we've sort of touched on briefly in this group, like LIHTC funds, you know, through the federal government. So the low income housing tax credit funds for developers, you know, that are paid out federally over a length of time to, you know, restrict housing in terms of their affordability, you know, and so some of those things, you know, might incentivize, especially like a younger developer, you know, or somebody who's sort of starting out. So it just,
Yeah, that's definitely something. I mean, a part of it for the developer is they need to do a rough back of the napkin pro forma as to what it's going to cost to do this and what their return's going to be. If the return's not big enough, they're going to say, no, thank you. But, those are the types of things that once they do the back of the napkin and figure out what's involved, we can say, okay, we can help boost that return by these funds here and these funds there. And you have this incentive that, that's how you get developers to do affordable housing, because they wouldn't do them on their own because there's not enough return, just by altruism. They need to make a profit.
Tom, if I, let me try to find Brendan's information contact.
Yeah.
I mean, you're the chair of this, so you should be the one to contact him.
Sure,
So
I'm happy to, and that's what I just plan to do. And just to, if for nothing else, information gathering. Go talk to Bill DePietri. Hey, Bill, what's it take to this due to the sun? He says, Tom, that's impossible. No one's ever going to develop that. That's useful information I would have. Or if he says, hey, I could do it, but I need to make X at least, and here's the hurdle, blah, 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 and then we can at least have a baseline to start working from to see if we can, value engineer it to get them to where they need to be.
Well, there's several groups out there that, Habitat for Humanity. I think you'd have to donate the land and then they would develop it.
Yeah, and that's another option. Yeah, there's plenty of low-income housing developers who do this and know all the traps too, and that might be a shortcut to do this too.
Right.
A shortcut, but I mean a good avenue. Let people who are experienced at doing this know all the alphabet soup of funding mechanisms from state and government sources, and they figure it all out. And at the end of the day, we get so that's a possibility too. And we're exploring all the above. So
I'll get all the information. There's another group that does that as well that I have information on.
Yeah, Community Builders in Boston is one. They do things in Boston. I don't know if they come out in the suburbs, but there are groups that do specifically. They're in the business of doing affordable housing.
Sarah, is there any more monies coming up from the Recoveries Act, the American Recoveries Act, or any other housing grants coming up that we could do, even get a feasibility study to find out what can go on that property with topography and all the problems?
So what I've read, from the ARPA funds, information release, is that that we could use some of that funding, I think, to actually develop the site, but I haven't read anything personally that talks about feasibility expenditure for those types of funds. But actual shovel ready sort of that those types of initiatives are, I think, approved. I mean, Carla is obviously learning more and more about how those funds can be spent. And what's great about the ARPA funds is that there is sort of a kind of a longer lead time in terms of, expenditure. So I know that the state wanted to earmark a bunch of the state ARPA funds for housing development. And then the local funds, I think it's sort of up to our discretion. But again, my understanding from what I've read is that it's about the actual creation of the housing versus the feasibility studies and those sorts of things. But I think that is definitely something to leverage for this type of project.
Well, what if we called it a site plan review?
Yeah, right.
Not a way to get it, because I understand the feasibility part, but if
good thing this meeting isn't recorded.
Well, it's all about creative writing. So we have about $3 million in ARPA funds. We have about $3 million in ARPA funds. What do you think it would cost? Maybe $30,000, $40,000 to actually have somebody take a look at the site and see what.
I would think less than that for a feasibility site, just to look at the zoning.
Should we ask selectmen, if the select board, if they'd be interested in, should we write up a request? Hey, would like to do this to find out, because this is a once in a lifetime opportunity.
Yeah, and John, I was even thinking. I mean, we have $500,000 sitting in our budget. I don't think a feasibility study would be $30,000. I think it.
I don't either, but I'm guessing.
But just to say hypothetically, it's $5,000. Do we spend $5,000 of our money just to get a basic feasibility study so we can go to a developer and say, hey, here's an opportunity or the existing zoning, blah, blah, if we do this, blah, 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 you could get, get 10 units on this, feasibly. You can obviously go your own direction on how you want to design and engineer your project. But initially, this is what the site's looks like it's yielding. That might be a useful, resource to be able to bring to people.
Now, what's the best ROI on that property? Do we want a builder to come in and we get 2 units of affordable if they come in and put stuff? Or do we, I'm asking because like.
You want more than 2 units.
Yeah, because one of the things we talked about, John, you weren't at the first thing, because I'm always talking about 40Rs. You guys know I'm always proselytizing 40R. The problem with 40R is it's great, it's good, but at the end of the day, it's just a project where, I think 20% of the units would be affordable. So you're right. If we had 10 units, we'd only get 2 affordable units, as opposed to some of these other programs where the whole project would be affordable. That's obviously better to get a project where all the units are affordable.
And if we went to DHD, say we got 5 units in just the existing building and then figured out a developer to, whatever other land or potential things would wind up with potentially the most yield? Like, because we say.
Yeah, I mean, again, we're probably getting into the weeds, but I would think that a developer would want to come in and get the existing building units as well. For them, it's going to be as many units as they can get to sell to make money. So I tend to think that if they're going to come in and develop the site, they're going to want to get the building, the building is with that. But who knows?
Is that building 2 floors or 3 floors?
3 if you count the basement.
I don't think you want to put units in the basement. That would be storage for units, right? So
what you could do. So what I talked to other people about, like say we made it into a housing authority building or something to that effect. The basement could be the community room. Cause it's not bad down there. Right now they've got office space down there. They've got storage down there, and they've got, office space down there. So you could feasibly put 5 units in there, 5 one-bedroom units in the existing building with a community room downstairs.
That wouldn't be bad.
One more quick question before we switch topics. Tom, do you know what they are going to do to try to resolve the discrepancy between the size of the parcel? I know that the assessor's map has it one way, or the assessor's card has it one way, and then there's some historic information, and it's about I think it's almost an acre, but
Paul said that he thinks he's incorrect, that it's probably the 4.2.
Right. I just wonder,
it's going to have to be zoned. It's going to have to be.
I'm completely unaware of the issue, Sarah. The short answer is I'm completely unaware. That's the first time I'm ever hearing about it.
Okay, well, there's an issue.
It's going to have to be surveyed. That's the only way to rectify that.
Right. Okay. So
that's the only way to rectify that is to actually have it surveyed.
Okay.
Yeah, and a developer can do that if they're going to go in. I mean, there should be some title record as to who, how the town came to own that land. There may be a deed from 1920 that conveyed the property to or whatever, that should describe the land, and then a surveyor would come in and take the legal description, draw property. But it should be easy to determine whether it's the legal description is 1 acre or 4 acres. It's
right.
But I may be missing the vagaries of this issue, so I'm not sure. There's always a discrepancy between title, legal descriptions, and assessor's information. Assessor's information is always never precise. It's not designed to be that precise.
Right.
It's sort of designed to be general.
Discrepancy. I'm sorry, I'm unaware of it.
There's just about an acre discrepancy between what is in the assessor's card, or on the assessor's map, and then what I think is described, like Tom was saying, in the deed and that sort of stuff. So I think that there's just, at one point they were talking about, maybe having it surveyed, or just trying to figure out exactly how big the parcel is, so because 3 acres versus 4 acres is
a big difference.
So
What part of the land is the discrepancy? Is the front of the building, behind the building, side?
They don't know. It's just the overall parcel size. So I think the deed has 4.2 acres. And if you look at any maps, it says 4.2 acres. The assessor's office has it 3.
Yeah, that sounds, if it's just a difference between the deed and the assessor's office, the deed,
and the assessor
a million times over.
Yeah. The assessor has said he's probably incorrect with his size. He he would assume that it is the actual 4.2, but
Right.
again, the only way to rectify that is to have it surveyed.
Yeah, but we
We're
wouldn't do a
not
survey
gonna
for
do
that, yeah.
We're not doing that. So
Right.
whoever does that, that's when that'll come into play. So we know where it is approximately. It's,
Yeah.
that's not the problem. That's not the big picture here. That's a minor issue at this point. We just need to A, get it qualified for the MBTA, and B, we need to figure out if we can develop this to where it's actually worth all of this
Do
work.
something with it, yeah.
Otherwise, we need to find you a new project, Tom, to build. Okay, does anybody else have any other questions or comments on this for Tom? No? Okay. Moving right along. We're going to the next. The Affordable Housing Trust Fund Strategic Plan. We had Tom McCartan from our housing consultant from the MAPC came in and gave a presentation to all of us. Sarah sent you all the presentation, which would be this. And we came up after the presentation, we came up with a series of questions and comments. So that I believe is what we're looking to discuss. And if you had any other comments or concerns or questions regarding this document, if you've had a time, I'm assuming you all had a few minutes to look at this. But that's something I'm going to let Sarah take over this discussion because she's also talked to John a little bit more.
Sure.
Sarah?
So, yeah, so John, was just kind of, looking for this group's feedback in terms of those, final questions at the end of that presentation. So I thought maybe if anybody had some thoughts about them, or we could just kind of go through one by one and just make some quick notes, and I could send those off to him. I think in general, we have, answers to these questions in terms of what this group would like to see. And, maybe setting up a discussion at some point with the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee to discuss these might make sense, at some point in the near future. But, the first question is, what types of projects or programs are the most important for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund to pursue? So, I think that we've identified as a group, that moderate income housing is really a big key that we're pushing for. And it sounds like, we all sort of tend to lean more towards ownership properties versus rental properties. So is that a good kind of summary for that first question, or does anybody else have any other thoughts?
Anyone?
I'm kind of both on that one. I lean towards more rental properties just because we get the most bang for the buck out of our housing census, for one. And usually rentals people can afford, and sometimes circumstances change.
Yep.
So that's my thought on that. But I'd love to see more diversified housing. If we could get more, affordable housing in. But what's the problem with the purchase? The problem with that is affordable is all relative. Affordable in this town still how to reach for some people, where rentals might bring in more.
Well, affordable with the DHCD would probably be around what, 200,000, Sarah?
It just depends on the family size and such, you know what I mean? So that's all kind of on a scale, depending on the size of the unit and the size of the family.
So the Stockwell Lane unit that we just sold.
Yes.
Yay. Has a very young family living in it, 2 children, parents. So it's a 2-bedroom. I believe that sold for just under.
I thought it was under 200.
I think it was like 187 or something. 195, somewhere in that. It was under 2.
That's great.
But I'm not sure what. But so to me, that would be kind of the area where we'd be looking for just under around 200,000 for a 2-bedroom.
And
I might be
John,
wrong, but that would be my assumption based on living in Southborough.
now I prefer the ownership versus the rental, because if you're renting, we have who's going to be property management for it.
Yeah.
We have all that maintenance, the furnace goes down in the middle of the night, you got all that stuff you have to then,
Turn it over to housing authority.
you can throw it over to the housing authority, but I don't know, I think a good thing about affordable housing is home ownership. That's yours. Nothing's gonna happen to it until you leave and sell the property. Rentals, I don't know, my tendency is for ownership, and like I said, a 2-bedroom in Southborough for under 200,000.
Oh, I agree.
I think that's a perfect place to be.
I lean to both.
Yeah, I think, I hear you, and the rental, game is definitely a lot more challenging than ownership. But I will echo John's sentiment that, we do get more credit, for rental units. And, there's a greater need, for rental units. So whatever that's worth.
My 2 cents on it. You guys have heard me say this before. What I think is difficult that came out of our housing plan was that, people who make a decent living, who make $100,000 a year can't afford, even a starter home in Southborough. It can barely afford a market rate apartment unit. Madison Place, those units go for, $3,000 a month. That's not affordable. That's not moderate housing. That's not something that somebody who's a school teacher or a fire person or something like that can afford. So I mean, I think in my mind, it's a range of 200,000 is really great, but I think there are people who can afford more, but just can't afford Southborough, can't afford a $750,000 house in Southborough, and can't afford to pay $3,500 a month in rents. I think there's, in my mind, affordability somewhere below that can at least make housing accessible to people who should be able to afford to live in Southborough.
The DHCD is going to set that pricing is the issue. DHCD,
yeah, it's like 80% median or income is moderate income. Yeah.
We don't have control over that. They set that pricing.
193.5 roughly is what Stockwell went for, according to Sam. That's awesome.
Okay.
Another proponent for ownership versus rental is we want families to stay here to raise their children. To me, maybe right or wrong, I think rental is, you might be here for a few years, but we'd rather see the roots be established.
I agree.
There's also elderly housing. Some of those people are moving out or on the back end. They're moving out of their houses want to continue living in Southborough, want to find a place to live. They're smaller. So I guess I see both sides.
Yeah, I would prefer the ownership versus the rental as well. I'm
agreed. Okay.
It's too transient. Rental's just too transient, and I just don't think that is really something the town would want to have. I might be wrong, but I don't think we want the transient issue coming into the town. I think we want, I believe the best thing for a young family is to have a home. They can call their own, that's affordable, and they can live in this community. It's a great community, so. That's my opinion. Anyway, Sarah.
So yeah, no, I think these are all valid points. You know what I mean, and I agree. The 200,000 is definitely a good for like that really low income folks. But I wonder if we could talk to DHCD about setting some of those a little bit higher. With that moderate income range, which would be more, closer to like 400,000. Like Tom was saying, folks who are earning maybe $150,000 a year as a household, but just not able to, purchase a house at 700,000. So the next question is, how much program administration can the Affordable Housing Trust Fund Committee or SHOPC take on, as part of supporting these types of efforts? And so that's maybe more of a rhetorical question, something to sort of think about, but it sounds like even just from this preliminary discussion on the first question that, we are not looking to collectively sort of get into the business of being land owners, you know what I mean, so to speak, in terms of the rental stuff. So just trying to gauge, I think John was just trying to gauge, how much program administration do we want to get into? How much do we have the capacity to get into in terms of, creating these new units?
Well, I don't think we want to get into any kind of control. I think we would hand it over to the housing authority. We do not want to have anything to do with controlling that or managing that. That's not within our purview of our mission. So
Agreed.
that is absolutely nothing I would have zero interest in getting involved in.
I brought that up, and their only concern was how it would be handled financially. In terms of taking over the responsibility, that didn't seem to be a concern.
I know, but again, that's not for us to decide or even discuss. That has absolutely nothing to do with us. That I don't know who in town would decide that, but that we don't get to control that. We don't get to decide that. We don't get to set any parameters in that. It has absolutely nothing to do with us. I don't know if planning does that, the selectmen, I have no idea, but that's not our job. That's housing authority would have to go talk to whoever would be in charge of that. We have absolutely nothing to do with it. And I don't even believe that I would bring that up to discuss at a meeting because it's not our purview. It's not our job. It's not what we're supposed to be doing. So I would not.
So then the next question is, how quickly do we want to see the existing funds drawn down? So is that something that we want to kind of, advocate for right away in terms of expenditure? Is that something that we want to just continue to build upon, and I think that, would depend on what, what we prioritize in terms of like short-term, purchases and such. I know there was a couple of houses that sort of came on the market that, may have been good investments. So it's just, do we want to do that right away? Or do we want to snowball those existing funds into, a bigger pool of money? What are people's thoughts?
Are you talking about the transfer of the CPC funds to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund?
Well, I think that's another question, so the transfer of those funds, in my opinion, should be done, right away. And I think that we've all sort of discussed, having those funds that have already been approved, transferred, immediately, so to speak, into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund so that they're there at the ready. So then the question is, once they get there, are we looking to invest those, in the short term, in the next couple of years, or are we looking to leave those there and continue to sort of roll them over year over year to try to build those funds for a really substantial project?
Well, we have to have a project that CPC is going to see the money is going to be going towards before they will do the transfer. Even though it's approved, they won't just transfer that money. So we need to find something to do or some type of a project, tell them that's what we're looking to put the money towards, and then they will release the funds. But we can't just ask them to release it. They're not going to do it.
I thought we looked into that and they can, because other communities do. I thought we could.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, John, what other communities do. They won't do it.
I was asking. That was a
If
question.
they've-
No, I'm saying to you, they won't do it. We have to have a project or a plan for that money. And even though it's approved at town meeting, the state mandate or the law with the CPC, they have the final say on that money, whether they transfer it or not. And they have said, if we tell them what we're doing with the money, then they'll transfer it. But if we don't have an idea of what we're doing with the money, they're not going to give it to us.
So we couldn't say, there's a question. So we couldn't say we wanted to put $50,000 a year from CPC funds annually into it to 5 years down the road, potentially purchase a bigger property. You couldn't do something like that?
Yes, you could. It sounds like CPC in this community does not want to do that. I don't understand why. I don't understand why you would have Affordable Housing Trust Fund and not move the CPC funds over into that pool of money once they have been approved by town meeting. That doesn't make any sense.
I
Right.
understand, I agree, but that's what we have been told. They will not unless we have, I mean, you gotta think about this, right? The money's sitting in their bank account and they're collecting the interest on it. So they're
Who's they?
making money on that money,
CPC.
CPC. So, and I'm on the CPC representing Shopsy, and unless we have a project.
But
So
call
to
on a
me,
project.
we're trying to develop South Union. We may have to have a feasibility study done. We may have to have it surveyed.
Yes.
We may have to, but
How do we change that then?
we can't. It's a
It's-
state. It's a,
It's not a state mandate, it's town, because other towns.
all
do
I
it.
can say to you is, I would suggest you call Freddie.
Okay,
The reason the reason why communities establish affordable housing trust funds is so that their CPC funds are clearly separated once they're approved by town meeting into a pool of money that's easily accessible and unencumbered from the CPC hoopla at the state level. And that's why communities set up affordable housing trust funds. So
Right.
if that is not how this is going to function in Southborough, then having an affordable housing trust fund is kind of moot.
I agree. I think the money should have been transferred in 2009, 2010, and 2011. It hasn't happened. It's 2021. They're still sitting on money from way back when. The money should be in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. I completely agree.
So right now, we have to tell the
I'm one
CPC
member.
that we have a project, and they have to say, yes, that's a project, or maybe not. Then we gotta go to the trust fund and says, we got something to spend it on. So we have a double layer of bureaucracy
it
to
makes no
access
sense.
funds.
That we shouldn't be having because they're tying our hands are tied. If
So-
something came on the market today, there's nothing we can do. We lose the opportunity because we don't have the
So-
funding because we have to go to two different groups to get money.
Why do we have a trust fund then? CPC
I don't know.
is the gatekeeper.
That's why I asked, how do we change this? Because there's got to be a
I
way
do-
to change it, because other communities, and it's not a state mandate, it's a town thing.
Right.
Yeah. I
So-
don't know
so
how to
who-
answer
who
that.
set that statute? Can we talk to town council and ask them? Who do we talk to about that? I mean, we're wasting our time without money. If we can't access, like you said, we have no access to get to the cash for a project, which makes zero sense. So why is this committee even here if we can't do anything with it? We're just spinning our wheels and saying, oh, we should do this, should do that, but we can't do it. So if other communities are doing, it's not a state statute, it's not a state law. Who wrote this? Is it a bylaw? Where is it? And how do we change it?
That's why
Is
I'm
my point.
suggesting you talk to Freddie.
Why would I talk to Freddie? She's going to give me her
Because
opinion. I want the legal
Freddie
opinion of
is the
law. Why would I
original-
talk to town council?
She's the head of, it doesn't matter, town council, it doesn't matter what it
Doesn't matter.
says.
It's a law. It's a town law.
No,
How do we
it's a
change it?
separate, John, it's a very separate entity. The selectmen can't do anything about it
I
either.
understand that. What I'm saying is it's not a state statute. So the state is not saying that that's how it's supposed to be run. CPC is saying that's how it's supposed to be run. So what I'm wondering is, how do you change the CPC bylaw? Because they have a guideline that they have to follow. So my question is, how do you change it?
And my answer to you again,
Is
so
talk
that
to
you
Freddie.
understand the process, because she will explain it to you, because she is one of the original people when this started. She's
Right.
been involved in it
I
from the
know how
very
the process
beginning.
works now, and she can explain that. My question is, how do you change the process? Because the process does not work. I understand, talk to Fred.
I've been asking this for 4 years,
But
John.
that's
and
why
I'm
I'm
not
saying we
getting
need to
anywhere.
talk to council, which makes
Yes.
the most sense.
Yes.
Freddie, not CPC, legal counsel. It's bylaw, it's statute somewhere that somebody on a committee can have an opinion on how it's supposed to be run. I'm not using historical on that, but look what's going on right there. They think they can do it one way. Council saying it's not supposed to be that way. It's an issue. I'm going to side with council. I think that makes the most sense. So we should ask them, how do we change this?
All right,
And
I will
that's my
reach out.
personal opinion.
Okay, I
Because
completely
it doesn't work.
understand your
It's
point.
broken.
I will reach out to Mark Purple and I will see if we can speak with council and ask.
It just makes sense because we all agree that the system's broken, that we need this money. So the question's not, oh, we should talk to CPC and find out what we can do. No, we should find out what legally can be changed. And then if it can't be changed, that's fine. Great. If it's not broken, I just misunderstood it. But if something's wrong that can be fixed, we should, to give us a fighting chance to get housing.
Right. And
I'll reach
then
out
if it-
to Mark. I'll reach out to
Thank
Mark
you.
today.
I appreciate it. I'm not trying to stir up anything, but I just don't understand, like, that there's got to be a way to change it. If it's broken and it's not a state thing, that other towns all do it.
you can't say it's broken, it's how it
No,
is
I'm not
established.
saying it's broken. I'm saying it's established and it's not working as
Correct.
we'd like it. How's that?
Yes.
I'm not saying broken. It's not working as I personally would like it to work. And
Right.
that just might be the way it is, but I just need to understand the why.
But it's
Yep.
different in other communities, so it doesn't make any sense. So I will reach out to
Right.
Mark Purple and see if we can get counsel, Jay Talaman, to take a look at it and maybe advise us as to what we can do to change this. So the money is more accessible to us, as we are the ones who are trying to get this done, and our hands are tied. We can't do anything.
And if Mark Purple pushes back, then say, why do we even have a housing trust fund committee if they cannot do anything?
Yeah, Mark
Without-
is pretty reasonable when you ask him for something like this and you're trying to get something done for the town. I mean, Mark is pretty reasonable. So
Okay. Okay.
I don't think that he's gonna push back on me and give me a hard time. I really don't. So
Okay.
let me see what I can do, and then I'll give you guys, shoot you all an email and let you know what I find out.
Sarah, do we know if there's any blighted properties that need work that potentially might be coming up on tax or anything like that we might be able to get and then have Habitat Humanity come in and rehab or asset pet or anything like that? I know you guys look all the time. I was just curious because.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with any off the top of my head, but that's definitely something I could ask the assessor. If he has any kind of insight into any properties that are blighted or are having some tax holding kind of issues.
Because we know we have
that there was-
$193,514.
And how much,
That's what we sold Stockwell for. So we know we have that. So we actually
Right.
could find it if we could find us something,
The minimum.
Plus we
right,
I think we had another 60 beside that.
right.
So hey, upward and onward.
So we have
Yeah.
214.3.
I'm okay with that. That's a start.
That's right. It's the start.
It's, again, then we have almost another 4 or 5 sitting in CPC. So we
Yeah, by the
have
time-
money, but we can't touch it.
Not until, and then you have to go to town meeting before they can approve it, right? Because it doesn't have to go through
No,
that.
no, that's what's
These are the
approved.
monies that have been
That's
approved
been
by
approved at town meeting that they're sitting on.
it's just
then-
the fact that it's not transferred
Right.
unless
And
we
then
have
I
a
think
project
that-
and they deem it as a project.
I think that another, part of this process with John and MAPC is to get, that language written for annual town meetings so that when those CPC funds are voted on, that they do immediately transfer over into the Affordable Housing Trust Fund into that bucket. Because
Okay,
there,
so we can do that at a special town meeting. The warrant's still open, right? We can just word
yes,
that language and get that
Yep.
into the selectmen and get that at special town meeting and get that set.
yeah,
When does
that,
the warrant close?
My understanding is at the end of September because it's gonna go to print at the beginning of October.
All right, so maybe Sarah, why don't we take a look at the language
Sure,
that is in the last warrant,
sure,
and let's see where the verbiage issue is,
sure.
and let's make a suggestion. Let's send that out to the committee, so they all have that in front of them.
Okay,
Let's highlight the questionable language that we want to change, and let's come up with an idea to change it. And then we can discuss it at our next meeting. And then we can write it up in time and get it in for a warrant article.
okay,
We have time, because it's not that complicated to change that language. But it will need a vote of the town meeting to change it officially.
I agree.
And that would alleviate this whole issue of
I agree.
tying our hands with the money.
Yep, I agree.
So
And I
let's get
think-
that, let's, you and I work on that ASAP, unless
Sure.
somebody else would like to do it, that with Sarah.
Not me.
Okay. I know how busy everybody else's schedules are, plus you guys work full time, and Sarah does too, but I have a little more time on my hands, so.
But this is my job full time.
Is everybody okay with that if we do that? Does that make sense to you? Okay,
Mhm.
That makes sense.
all right, so we've covered everything on our meeting, on the agenda. Let's discuss the next meeting for us. Let's pull up September.
Can I ask a question on the draft housing element thing?
Yes, please.
Yeah, the data's all from like 2017, right? A lot of it
Yep.
is from the census. Didn't we just have a census recently? Can we update this easily or not at all?
Yep, so actually we talked a little bit about the data updates. So the census has started to release some of that information and it'll roll out continuously through the fall. And so we are looking to potentially have a small contract with, a consulting firm, maybe a community opportunities group who did the last round for the master plan committee to update those as much as possible. I think there's a bit of a timing sort of hitch because as the 2020 census data rolls out, we are really trying to finalize the master plan. So, we do want that updated information, but we also don't want to hold off any further on getting a fully realized draft of this plan out. So, I was talking to Judith the other day in terms of, trying to get some of that information updated as much as possible, with what's been released and what might be released in the next couple of months so that we can get into the plan.
It's great, by the way. You did a great job on it. I don't know if anybody else has read it thoroughly or anything. I have no life, so I did, but it's actually really well written.
Thanks.
Well, you're right there on my screen, pointing to you, Sarah. My finger's pointing to you on my screen, like the Brady Bunch.
You know, right?
Brady Bunch. We need a few more bodies.
That's right.
Okay, so let's look at September. I am in Disney until the 7th. So I'm
I
not
am
available
not.
the first week, but I'm available the next 2 weeks. How about
The 15th or the 22nd, those are both Wednesdays, if I'm keeping with Wednesday.
This is Yom Kippur,
Okay,
when is?
the 15th.
so the 22nd?
Can we meet before that? Because if we're gonna try to change something and get something in for a warrant article, we need to get that in before a week before. Like, I would rather have it done sooner. How about the 14th?
14th is fine. Yom Kippur doesn't start till sundown.
Okay,
So how about 14th, Tuesday, the 14th at 8 AM?
I can make anything work.
Yep, that
Okay.
looks fine.
Tuesday, September the 14th. And one of the things we'll do, Tom will have had his meeting with the subcommittee. Are we gonna have a master plan update by then, do you think, Tom?
No, it's the
Okay.
22nd. So do please by Labor Day, if anybody has any edits to that document, because I do want to give it to Judith. She is working hard on the common format.
Okay, perfect. So if everybody can please take a look at that document and get all changes to Tom, that would be greatly appreciated, so they can get that updated. We won't have to do that. They'll have a subcommittee report, so it should be a relatively shorter meeting on that day then, but we'll see. You never know what's gonna happen. Okay, anybody else have anything you might want to add to the agenda? Let me know, or Sarah know. And I think that's it for today then.
That's it.
Okay,
Tom, are you in Southborough?
Yep.
Tom? Wow. How'd you fare?
It was crazy in the morning, and then I don't know, around 11 o'clock, sunny out, nice breeze. It was beautiful.
Wow.
It was strange in the morning. The
We had a
wind
lot
was
of
coming.
leaves down here. I had like 3 in my pool.
Yeah, no, we didn't have
Storm.
no damage down by my part, but Town Beach had a lot.
Tom's in Narragansett, by the way.
oh, okay.
Not right now, but
No, well, Rhode Island got hit pretty hard, I think, to start, so. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn. So moved.
Second.
Motion to adjourn.
Second? Anyone?
second.
Okay, all those in favor, it's a roll call vote. Alex, you guys have all moved on my screen. Tom M,
Yes.
Tom B,
Yes.
John Wood,
Yes.
and Dorian